Sometimes you just have to fight. A good marriage, every marriage is going to have battles. You're going to have disagreements. And a lot of times we try to avoid all those things. But in reality, sometimes fights are good because fights reveal that there's a tension of wills. There's good versus evil. Today on Life Talks, we're going to be talking about fights that need to be had. I'm Ben. We're here with Dan. We're the teaching pastors at Life Fellowship here in Cornelius, North Carolina. And Dan, this was another idea that you had that I think is really important because the reality is there's too much passivity in families today.
Yeah. Now this will be an interesting conversation because on the Enneagram,
I'm a 9.
You're a 9. You're a peacemaker.
I'm a peacemaker.
Yeah. And so I'm the 3 achiever. Yeah. So I'm also the I'm the 40-pound rat that's walking down an alley going, here, kitty, kitty, kitty. Sometimes I'm just looking for something to combat, right?
I remember when Facebook first came out. Okay,
I went nuts. Didn't I?
It was like a kid in a candy store, and Dan would throw out just these thought bombs and just watch
the bedlam.
Watch the people scurry around. How dare you? And I could tell, because I knew you're laughing.
Oh, hysterically.
But you love to stir the pot.
I do. As I've aged, I've tried not. I still love to do it. I just try not to do it as much. But it is obnoxious.
But it's one of those things where you kind of get to know who people are. Mm-hmm. When you're fighting with them.
Yeah, and you look for their triggers. There's certain things that just set people off, and I'm good at finding them. No, what I want the reason I wanted to talk about this today is I think there are some things that you say, you know what, this is going to be a battle at my house, but it is a battle worth fighting.
It is worth fighting. And this is important because as parents, full disclosure, my wife and I just watched my 2 nieces and nephew, ages 8, 5, and 3, or 8, 6, and 3. I can't remember what it is exactly, but and we had a wonderful time. We had it for 4 days, but it brought back a lot of memories of experiences with our own kids, and I was reminded of how physically exhausting it is to watch kids that age because they're just constant in need and you're constantly navigating, fighting and all kinds of, and they're wonderful kids. We had a great time, but I do recall entering, you remember back when you're like, man, there were times when I was like, I am too tired. I'm too exhausted
to deal with this
now. And you can do that a couple times, but that should not be the pattern.
Yeah.
And I think that's what you're saying is it's okay to have a bad day, but don't have a bad year because then again, you're going to wake up one day and be like, oh, please, Jesus, help me right now.
Yeah.
So walk us through what are some of these battles that we need to be intentional and not passive.
Yeah, and I've got about a dozen. We'll never get to all of them. And some of these, by the way, I've seen in other places.
Yeah.
But, one of the things is I think you ought to have a fight about mealtime. Not at mealtime, but about mealtime. Sometimes you will have it at mealtime. I believe this. You need to fight to have your kids and your spouse at a table at least 5 times a week.
We're going to sit together.
Yeah. We're going to have a family meal.
Yeah.
I am absolutely shocked and appalled at how infrequent people eat around a dinner table today.
And talk.
Yeah. And that means no phones, no TV, no iPads, no nothing.
I mean, Dan, first of all, I'm not saying we are not the perfect family, but my kids' friends, they've had all these friends over to our house to have meals with us, and they will tell my kids afterwards, we've never done this as a family.
Yeah.
It's like it's this revolutionary thing where they absolutely love it. And I can't tell you how many times we've had, I mean, there's 5 of us in our family where we have like 8, sometimes 9, 10 other people around, not 10 total around our table, tiny little table. And it's like, because these kids are like, I don't get this. Yeah. And they think it's the most amazing thing ever. Yeah. But
and
it's
that
not.
You talk and that you laugh and you tell stories
and
you fight.
And it's not and it's not that it's always been easy. It hasn't always been easy. It's sometimes when especially when they get older teenagers, they want to live their own schedule. They want to do their own thing, but you are exactly right. Fight for mealtime. Yeah. That is huge.
All right. So a second one is fight the me first fight.
Okay.
You got to make your kids go last a lot.
Why are you saying this?
Because not every time for everything, but I think, this happens, and I've voiced my thoughts about this, and I understand the rationale for it, but it drives me crazy. And all the time I was growing up, the kids always ate first. When we would have a big family meal, all the cousins were all there.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why is because the moms were like, let's get them going so we can enjoy the meal. I get
that.
100%.
100%.
But it used to gall me to death that sometimes the last person to eat would be my mom, the matriarch of the family.
Yeah.
And I got to the point where I refused to put one thing on my plate until mom had been served.
Yeah.
Because it's about honor and about respect and about, a whole lot of other things. When kids have the expectation that they get to go first at everything, that they get to, then they start believing that life revolves around them.
Yeah.
Sometimes they need to learn the joy that should come with taking the smallest piece. Sometimes they need to be the one who gives up the remote.
Yeah.
Or uses the cruddy game what do they call it? I don't know. The handheld.
Yeah.
Every once in a while you got to do your brother's chores because he's not feeling well today. Or you don't get to pick first on the choice of what we're going to do tonight. They won't like it, but I think they need it.
Yeah.
Because we live in an overly entitled culture where if we don't get our way, we tend to melt down.
Or we opt out. I mean, one of the things that we dealt with in our family was when it was movie night, it was like, all right, when the kid gets to choose the movie, the other kids that didn't like, well, I'm not going to watch it.
Yeah, I'm out.
Then you're like, okay, we're not playing this game. And you can, it's difficult when they're older and they have the stuff, they don't understand the importance of what you're saying, right? Mm-hmm. But you're trying to teach them character to say, it's not about you. Mm-hmm. And sometimes you have to yield yourself what you want for the sake of others. That's really important. Yep. So, good stuff.
Here's another one that I really feel very strongly about, and that's the work fight.
Okay.
And the work fight is this. Everybody has to work. And your kids ought to be working.
Absolutely.
You should not be serving your kids.
100%.
Your kids make a mess, they need to be helping with the mess.
Kids need to have chores.
They need to have chores. When you get done eating, kids shouldn't be able to go outside and play. Kids shouldn't be, dad even, shouldn't be going in watching TV. We shouldn't, head for the devices until the table is cleared. And everybody, depending, its age, but 5-year-olds can unload a dishwasher. 100%. And they may not be able to put everything up in the upper cabinets, but they can stack it neatly on the counter so the mom can.
Yeah.
But why should mom be the slave of the whole family simply because it's domestic? We all helped. Little kids can put the ketchup bottle back in the refrigerator.
That's right.
So there's all kinds of things that can be done. And as soon as your kids can get a job, let them get a job. Let
them get a really crappy job.
Yes. Make them work at McDonald's.
I'm telling you, you need to let your kid have one crappy job.
Absolutely.
Because they
should have to mow grass. They should have to work at McDonald's. They need
to have something where it's like, I don't really enjoy this, but you're teaching them work ethic. I had to constantly battle this with my own children. It's like they were 17 and wanted the best job known to mankind.
What's the crappiest job you ever had?
I worked in the dish pit.
Oh, I forgot about that. I did too.
I worked in a dish pit at this restaurant. I was 14 years old.
But your skin was beautiful from all the steam.
I remember I didn't know about child labor laws. I would go to work at 4 in the afternoon. I wouldn't get done sometimes till midnight, 1 in the morning. No break, nothing. Mm-hmm. And I'm not ashamed to say this because if there was ever a plate that came back and there was a piece of food that was not touched, I would sometimes eat it.
Oh, I've done that.
Because you're like, I'm working.
Shrimp was my favorite because we couldn't afford shrimp, and you could see if they had no bites out of it, it was
right. Okay. So to me, I'm like, I'm working 8 hours, and so I'm working like my butt off. Sometimes I worked in this restaurant. They had a banquet hall, they had a buffet, and then a regular restaurant. It was this massive restaurant, and sometimes I'd be the only dish guy. And so I'm literally just washing dishes for 8 hours straight, and then I'll have to wash the pans. And so no break, nothing. So when food would come by in that plate that wasn't touched, I'm taking a bite of it. You know what I mean?
And I kept a cracker box. It had a plastic bag on the inside of it, and it would hold like 10 to 15 pounds. And I worked at a steakhouse, so I would take all the leftover steak. I didn't eat it. Okay, I would throw it in this box, and I had an Irish setter.
Oh, that
would be standing at the end of the driveway quivering when I'd come home from work. And he would eat literally 10 pounds of grade A meat. He was the most beautiful dog you've ever seen. You could see a reflection in his coat.
But having that job, the next job I had was like, all right, it's 2 hours, you get a 15-minute break. I'm like, what's all this break stuff you're giving me right now? I had no idea. And I would come home.
You had a series of crappy jobs until I hired you, though, because you used to sell shoes, too.
I sold shoes.
I did. That was a disgusting
job. But I remember
job.
telling my dad, this is the way the job is. And he's like, good. I mean, he didn't.
I can hear you.
There was no
that.
sympathy. It was like you need to work hard. You need to work your butt off, and you need to have a really crappy job. So that number one,
you should have to walk to the job too.
The point is, don't look for don't go on. I don't want this issue, and I don't want this issue, and or when you have a bad boss, it's like I'm going to fight for you. Like, let them have a bad boss, let them have a bad job, let them experience that, so that they learn how to control their attitudes, learn how to control their work ethic. That it's not God's refining their character, and when you hijack that as a parent, they're eventually going to have to learn that character lesson.
Yes.
They can either learn it in your home or they can learn it outside your home, which is 10 times harder.
Or you're going to have a 30-year-old living in your house and expecting you to do their
with
laundry,
no character,
which is just appalling.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
this is a huge one. I don't know if there's an even more important one than this one, and we probably ought to do a whole episode on helping our kids develop a good work ethic.
Yeah,
if you help your kid develop a good work ethic, you have given them a gift.
One of the greatest gifts of life.
It'll serve them well in their relationships, in their family,
Yep.
in their finances.
100%.
Yeah. Ooh, that was a
Put
good
that down, Britt.
Yeah, we'll put a star by this one. All right. Here's another one. This one sounds really, really weird, but fight the boredom fight.
Okay.
So the boredom fight is this. When
I'm bored.
There's nothing to do around
and they all
here.
say in the same tone, don't they?
Yeah.
I'm bored.
Yeah. So do not appease their boredom. Do not hand them, when's the food coming? I'm bored. Oh, well, here, look at my phone. I'll put on a YouTube video. You know why you're doing that? So that the kid's not bugging you.
Mm-hmm.
Or you could actually have a conversation with them. Or you could actually teach the kid to wait until the food arrives without whining. But every time our kid says
this is going to be the curmudgeon episode.
Am I getting into it? No. You can say, I'm getting fully animated. But the reality is, we don't have to have every minute scheduled
100%
and occupied. Kids need unscheduled time. I loved when I was growing up to drive the tractor in the hayfield or to plow or do something because it was or riding. My dad never bought a riding lawnmower, but use a lawnmower and you're going the same pattern over. You didn't even think about it, but I thought
yes.
and I dreamed and I planned. I had conversations and I argued.
And that is such a vital part of human development. I mean, scientifically, psychologically, your brain needs downtime. Your brain needs time to imagine. Your brain needs time. Like, boredom is built into the human experience. And if you don't experience boredom, your brain isn't actually developing the way it should.
Yeah.
And I think...
and there's another aspect, I believe, to it, that if you give in and fill up your mind all the time with external stimuli in order to keep you occupied and interested, you're going to become an activity addict.
Yeah, you'll be addicted to dopamine, and dopamine addiction leads to all kinds of other addictions.
Yeah, it's a gateway drug.
Yes, so you have to learn to teach your kids, hey, okay, you're bored. You can do two things.
Read a dang book.
Yeah, you can do this. Here's your two options. That's my wife was so good at that. When kids said, "I'm this" or "I'm that," she's like, "All right, you can do this or this." I don't want to. Well, that's your choice. But don't, you don't have to be the cruise boat director for your family.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, great.
So don't try to map out everything. There are times when scheduling is important, but boredom is an important part of a kid's life to learn how to think and imagine and dream and create. And so, yes, love that.
All right. Here's another one. The war for reading.
Okay.
Our kids are not reading anymore,
right,
because they're watching videos.
Right.
But reading is tied to everything from cognitive development to our ability to focus.
To the ability to communicate.
I can always tell when I'm reading papers when I'm grading whether a kid was a reader or not. Their vocabulary is different between night and day. It also teaches you how to punctuate and use good grammar, because then you recognize bad grammar when you put it out there
100%.
because you've seen grammar
Yes.
so often.
Yes.
Counterfeit because you know what the original looks like. I did my doctoral dissertation on this, and part of it was it doesn't have to be brilliant reading. They don't have to be reading a classic or a nonfiction historical, treatise. They can read the back of cereal boxes and it'll improve their test scores.
Wow.
I proved that with my research.
Wow.
So here's the cool side to it is that if you teach your kids to read and you assist them in reading good quality stuff, you'll change the trajectory of their life. Charlie Tremendous Jones used to say, you'll be the same today as you are in 10 years, except for the people you meet and the books you read. And I've always found that to be such a profound statement. Every great leader I know is also a great reader. And some of the most erratic leaders I've ever seen, Donald Trump, admit to not reading. And so it's not a compliment to say I don't read.
Yeah.
And I would simply say this, if your kid wants a car, if your kid wants to go to summer camp, if your kid wants this and you're going to help supply that, and first car, I don't have a huge, I wouldn't give my kid a brand new car if I give him a junker. But have them earn that and have them earn it by reading.
Every summer, Dan, I'm so glad you brought that up. Every summer, my parents would give us, they want us to keep the brain moving, and they would give us a list of $5 books and $10 books.
Amazing.
And then there's every once in a while, my dad would read a book that he absolutely loved, and he would say, "This is a $100 book."
Wow.
And so, it was like, we would that would be an issue for us. We could see how much money we could make. My brother, sometimes it was $60, and this is back in the mid '80s. But $60 back in the mid '80s was good money.
Yeah.
And so incentivize your kids with reading, with money. I mean, you might be thinking, well, I just want them to love reading. Well, listen, they're not going to love reading at first, but if you incentivize it with the right thing, they will eventually love reading.
It's like every other skill. You have to get good at it before it becomes easy for you.
100%.
And so, all right, another one I want to hit is the battle against unhealthy habits. Because unhealthy habits eventually lead to addictions.
100%.
So, again, if you see your kid developing an unhealthy habit, it's time for an intervention. Don't feed it and don't permit it. And I think there's some things that we need to be aware of that perhaps previous generations didn't. One of them would be how much time they're spending on the internet.
Yes.
How soon they have access to a smartphone.
Yes.
How much time they're spending gaming.
Or YouTube.
Especially
younger kids, YouTube is a very dangerous thing because it's one video after another, after another, after another, and it's just something you can really get sucked into.
Here's another one that is going to shock some people, and for all of you who think that your kid's the next Peyton Manning, you're just going to have to, deal with the reality. I had a child who literally could shoot free throws for 3 or 4 hours at a time. And I thought it was cool because he was a great shot. But the problem was, I believe, that was an early tendency toward repetitive thinking on something that he enjoyed doing that led to other struggles that could happen of an addictive nature.
Right.
Some of us give demonstrations of being addictive, and my parents were aware of that with me with reading, by the way. I got punished when I was a kid by having my books taken away.
Wow.
Because I would read to the exclusion of everything else, and I had to be monitored. So the problem with my kids, the war of reading at my house was Dan's reading too much.
But what you're saying is nothing should dominate us.
Nothing should dominate. Nothing should be taken beyond a habit of reasonable.
Yes.
The life is about balance and moderation.
Yes.
We used to talk about the virtue of moderation, and somehow we think it's cool now to be so totally, slavishly devoted to one thing. And I do think we can be excellent. And practice makes perfect. And a good pianist rehearses 8 hours a day because that's their job.
But what you're talking about is when a child finds their joy and their hope in this some activity, and the moment you take it away, they melt. That's not a sign of health.
That is
a healthy attachment.
That is a blaring warning sign. I'm glad you brought that one up.
That's good.
All right. I'm going to do one more.
And
then and I didn't get them all. Surprise, surprise. The battle of family contact. By family contact, I mean this: proximity. That it goes back to the meal one. Be sitting at the table. Well, they won't talk. Okay, then just sit there. But then you're going to listen. Or you may not even going to listen. You're just going to be in my presence.
Yeah.
Don't do your homework in the basement. or basement. In my bedroom is in the basement. Don't do your homework in the bedroom. Do it at the dinner table, or I'm sorry, at your dining table while you're working in the kitchen on something else.
Yeah.
When you go to Walmart, take a kid with you.
Mm-hmm.
Show up to their ball games and drive them back home.
Mm-hmm.
There's being in their space, in their proximity is really, really key. You won't have a brilliant, scintillating, life-changing conversation every time, but you will have a series of small engagements and interactions. They're good. You say, well, every time we're together, we fight. Then fix that.
Yeah.
Figure it out.
But it's when you have those little penny moments, penny, eventually you'll have the opportunity to have those $10 moments. So don't think like I've got to hit a home run. Just if it's a penny moment, it's a penny moment. But eventually, it will open the door for an even bigger conversation.
Yeah, and we need to quit buying into this socialization crap that's being fed to us by psychologists and so forth. My kid needs more socialization with his peer group. No, your kid needs less socialization with their peer group because their peer group's idiots.
And what I would say is the right kind of socialization.
Yeah, and sometimes that socialization involves other adults.
Yeah.
Somebody who's an expert in a field in which they have an interest.
Yeah.
So I'm not against socialization, isolate your kid and put him in a closet, but have a strategy for it other than hanging around with the cool kids.
Yeah. That's good. All right. Well, listen, these are all important things. Man, we should have just had more episodes, Dan. Maybe we'll we'll do a part 2 eventually down the road.
But aren't you glad that we don't approach this with the idea that, oh my goodness, we're never going to fill our 21 minutes this week, right? We always have
something to talk about. Listen, we understand the battles are hard as parents, but don't be passive. Don't allow life just to drift by. We understand it's hard, but you have a great opportunity to impact and to influence the way God wants you to, and sometimes that requires you to have to fight. And so don't back down from that. We hope this has been encouraging to you, your spouse, your family. Thanks again for joining us on Life Talks, and we'll talk to you next time.